My name is Joshua Myers. I am 30 years old, and 15 years ago, my parents threw me out into a thunderstorm because they needed my bedroom for my brother's drum set. Last week, my mother, the woman who told me I was a waste of space, threw herself onto the hood of my Porsche Cayenne in the company parking lot, screaming that she needed my kidney. Before I tell you about the restraining order and the DNA test that destroyed her marriage, tell me where you are watching from in the comments. I read every single one. You need to understand the scene to understand the audacity. It was a Tuesday evening in late October. I work as a lead landscape architect for a firm that specializes in therapeutic gardens for hospitals and rehab centers. It is ironic, I know, considering my history with family and health. I had just finished a site visit and pulled into our secure garage. I was tired. It was a good tired, the kind that comes from honest work and a career built from the ground up. I turned off the engine of my Porsche Cayenne Turbo GT. I mention the car not to brag, but because it represents safety to me. It is a tank. It is quiet. It is mine. Nobody bought it for me. Nobody can take it away from me. I gathered my blueprints and opened the door. The parking garage was dimly lit, the air smelling of concrete and damp tires. I heard footsteps echoing rapidly against the floor. I instinctively tensed up. When you grow up the way I did, you never lose that hypervigilance. You always expect a blow to come from the dark. Joshua! The voice stopped me cold. It was shrill, desperate, and terrifyingly familiar. It was a voice I hadn't heard in person for a decade and a half, but one that still played in my nightmares. I turned around. Sandra Myers, I can't call her mom, not anymore, was rushing toward me. She looked older. The last time I saw her, she was a vibrant woman who spent all her time and money pampering her golden child. Now, her blonde hair was brittle and pulled back in a messy bun. Her face was gaunt, her eyes wild and rimmed with red. She was wearing a coat that looked 2 sizes too big. She didn't stop at a respectful distance. She slammed her hands onto the hood of my car, blocking my path. "Thank God!" she panted, her chest heaving. "Thank God I found you. I've been waiting here for 6 hours. The security guard wouldn't let me up. I didn't move. I stood by the open door of my car, one hand on the frame, ready to jump back in and lock it. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my face remained stone. This is something I learned from my Uncle Harold. Never let them see you bleed. "What do you want, Sandra?" I asked. My voice was calm, almost bored. It was the only armor I had. She flinched at the use of her first name. "Good. Joshua, please, don't be like that. We don't have time for grudges. It's Tyler. It's your brother. Tyler. Of course. It was always about Tyler." "I don't have a brother," I said, reaching for my phone. "You have 3 minutes before I call security." "He's dying," she screamed. The sound echoed off the concrete walls, sharp and piercing. She fumbled with a large, battered tote bag she was carrying and pulled out a thick stack of papers. "His kidneys are gone, Josh. Both of them. He's in end-stage renal failure. The dialysis isn't working anymore. He's septic. He needs a transplant immediately." I looked at her, really looked at her. I expected to feel something. Pity? Sadness? But all I felt was a cold, detached curiosity. "That sounds like a medical issue. Why are you telling me?" "Because you're the match." She thrust the papers toward me. "We ran the numbers. We looked at the genetics. You're a 99% match. It's a miracle. The doctors said it's rare to find a sibling match this perfect. You can save him. You're the only one who can save him." I stepped back, refusing to touch the papers. "How do you know I'm a match? I've never given you a blood sample. I haven't seen you since I was 13. She hesitated just for a fraction of a second. Her eyes darted to the side. We have ways. We hired a specialist to look into the family history. It doesn't matter how we know. The point is, God has given you a purpose. All these years we wondered why things happened the way they did. But now I see it. You were meant to be here for this moment. To save Tyler." I felt a wave of nausea roll over me. She was rewriting history right in front of my face. She was framing my abandonment, my homelessness, my struggle, as God's plan to keep me fresh as a spare parts bin for her favorite son. You think my purpose on this earth is to be an organ farm for Tyler? I asked, my voice dropping dangerously low. He's your brother, she wailed, tears finally spilling over. He's brilliant, Josh. He has so much potential. He's an artist. He has a wife. He has a life. You're single. You're just working. You can live with one kidney. It's a small sacrifice to give him a future. There it was. The useless tag again. Even now, standing in front of my luxury car, wearing a tailored suit, owning my own home, in her eyes, I was still less valuable than Tyler. Tyler, who I knew for a fact had never held down a job for more than 6 months. Tyler, the artist. You want my kidney, I repeated. I'm scheduling the consultation for Monday, she said, wiping her nose, assuming my silence was agreement. That was Sandra's way. She steamrolled people. I'll drive you. We can go together. It'll be like old times. We can be a family again, Josh. Dad, Richard misses you too. He's just ashamed. But if you do this, if you bring Tyler back to us, everything will be forgiven. Everything will be forgiven. As if I was the one who had sinned. I looked at the security camera in the corner of the garage. I knew the guard, an ex-Marine named Marcus, was watching. Sandra, I said, you have exactly 10 seconds to get off my car. What? She blinked, stunned. Did you not hear me? He is going to die. People die every day, I said coldly, especially people who spend their lives drinking and using drugs. Her face went white. How dare you? He has a condition. I'm sure he does. And now you want to cut me open to fix it. I pressed the speed dial on my phone. Marcus, I have an intruder in the B2 garage. Harassment. Yes, send the police too. You monster. She lunged at me, grabbing the lapel of my jacket. Her fingernails dug into the expensive wool. I gave you life. You owe me this. You owe him this. You selfish, useless little brat. I didn't push her. I simply raised my hands, palms open, stepping back so the camera could see I wasn't attacking her. Don't touch me. I will sue you, she shrieked, her mask of the grieving mother slipping to reveal the predator underneath. I will get a court order. You can't hoard a vital organ when your brother is dying. It's criminal. Marcus and 2 other guards appeared at the elevator bank. They looked massive and serious. Sandra saw them and panicked. She shoved the stack of medical records onto the hood of my car. Read it, she hissed, backing away. Just read it. Look at his levels. Look at the suffering. If you have a single shred of humanity left in that cold heart, you'll call me. Monday, Josh. Monday is the deadline. She turned and ran before the guards could detain her. I watched her go, a small, frantic figure disappearing up the ramp. I looked down at the papers on my car. The wind from the ventilation system fluttered the cover page. St. Jude's Medical Center. Patient, Tyler Myers. Diagnosis, end-stage renal disease secondary to toxin-mediated injury. Toxin-mediated. That's medical speak for, he poisoned himself. I picked up the file. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from a rage so old and deep it felt like magma in my veins. I shouldn't have taken it. I should have thrown it in the trash. But I needed to know. I needed to know what condition Tyler really had. And more importantly, I needed to know how she obtained my medical compatibility data when I hadn't seen a doctor outside of my private network in Seattle in 10 years. I got back into my car and locked the doors. The silence of the Porsche enveloped me. I looked at the passenger seat where the file lay. That file was a bomb. I didn't know it yet, but Sandra hadn't just handed me a plea for a kidney. She had handed me the evidence that would destroy her entire life. But before we get to the DNA test and the restraining order, you need to understand why I would let my own brother die. You need to understand the bedroom, the drums, and the storm of 2010. To understand the hate, you have to understand the hierarchy. In the Myers household, there was the son, and there was the shadow. Tyler was the sun. I was the shadow. Tyler was 3 years older than me. By the time he was 16 in 2010, he was already the golden boy of our small town in Oregon. He was the quarterback of the junior varsity football team. He had the blonde hair, the winning smile, and the ability to charm his way out of anything. My parents, Richard and Sandra, didn't just love him. They worshipped him. They lived vicariously through him. Richard, who worked a dead-end job in sales, saw Tyler as his ticket to prestige. Sandra saw him as her perfect creation. Then there was me, Joshua. At 13, I was scrawny, asthmatic, and quiet. I didn't play football. I didn't charm people. I liked to draw. I liked to organize things. I liked silence. In a house that valued noise and aggression, I was an anomaly. I was the useless one. It started with small comments. Why can't you be more like your brother? Get your nose out of that book and go outside. Why are you so weird? But by 2010, the verbal jabs had turned into active displacement. We lived in a 3-bedroom house. My parents had the master. Tyler had the second largest room, facing the street, filled with trophies and posters. I had the small room at the back, facing the garden. It was tiny, but it was mine. It had a big window that let in the morning light, which was perfect for my drawing. I spent hours there, sketching buildings, landscapes, creating worlds where everything had order and purpose. The trouble began when Tyler decided he wanted to be a rock star. He had injured his knee slightly in a game, a minor sprain, and decided football was too limiting for his genius. He wanted to play drums. The problem was, Tyler's room was too small for the massive drum kit Richard bought him on credit. And Tyler complained that the street noise ruined his artistic concentration. One Saturday morning, I was sitting at my small desk, finishing a sketch of a bridge I'd seen in a magazine. The door banged open. Richard stood there holding a tape measure. Sandra was behind him, arms crossed. Up, Richard said. He didn't even look at me. He started measuring the wall. What's going on? I asked, clutching my pencil. Tyler needs this room, Sandra said, as if she were discussing the weather. The acoustics are better here, and it's quieter. He's starting a band. Is it going to be big, Josh? He has real talent. But this is my room, I said. Where am I going to go? Richard retracted the tape measure with a snap. You're moving to the basement. My blood ran cold. The basement wasn't finished. It was damp, dark, and smelled of mildew. It was essentially a concrete box with a furnace in the corner. I can't live in the basement, I said, my voice shaking. My asthma. The doctor said the dampness is bad for my lungs. I'll get sick. Sandra sighed, rolling her eyes. Always the drama with you. You're not going to get sick. We'll put a rug down. It's just temporary until Tyler gets signed. No, I said. I stood up. I was small for my age, but desperation gave me courage. It's not fair. Tyler has a huge room. He can put the drums there. I need the light for my drawing. Richard turned on me, his face red. Your drawing? You think your little scribbles are more important than your brother's music? He's going to be a star. What are you going to be? You're useless, Joshua. You don't contribute anything to this family. You just take. I get straight A's, I yelled. Tyler is failing math. That was the wrong thing to say. Richard grabbed my sketchbook and ripped the page out. He crumpled my bridge in his fist. Grades don't pay the bills, smartass. Talent pays the bills. Personality pays the bills. Now pack your crap. You're moving downstairs. I spent the next month living in the basement. It was exactly as I feared. It was freezing at night. The air was thick with mold spores. I started coughing within 3 days. By the second week, I was using my inhaler 4 times a day. My parents didn't care. They were too busy hosting band practice upstairs. The house shook with the sound of Tyler banging on the drums. He wasn't even good. He had no rhythm. But my parents clapped and cheered like he was Ringo Starr. The breaking point came in November. A massive storm system was hitting the Pacific Northwest. The forecast called for torrential rain and high winds. I came home from school on a Friday, shivering and wheezing. My chest felt tight. I went to the kitchen to get a glass of water, and I saw them. Tyler was sitting at the kitchen table eating a steak. My parents were hovering over him. "We need to talk," Sandra said when she saw me. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask about my hacking cough. "About what?" I wheezed. "Tyler needs the basement too," she said. I stared at her. "What?" "The drums are too loud for the bedroom," Richard explained, pouring a beer. "The neighbors are complaining. We need to move the studio to the basement. It's soundproof down there." "Where am I supposed to sleep?" I asked, panic rising in my throat. "The couch," Sandra said. "Or the floor in the living room. It's fine. You're small." "No," I said. "No. You took my room. You put me in the dungeon. I got sick. Now you want to take that too? Where does it end? Do I sleep in the garage? The doghouse?" "Watch your tone," Richard warned. "I won't," I screamed. "I hate you. I hate him. He's not a genius. He's a loser who can't play drums and failed algebra. You're ruining everything for him." Silence descended on the kitchen. Tyler stopped chewing. He looked at me with a smirk. "See, Mom? I told you he was jealous. He's trying to sabotage my creative process." Sandra looked at me with a look of pure disgust. It wasn't anger. It was something worse. It was rejection. "You are a cancer in this house," she said quietly. "All you do is complain. All you do is bring us down. We are trying to support your brother's dream, and you are being selfish." "I'm 13, I cried. "I'm supposed to be selfish. I'm a child. You're supposed to take care of me." "We're done taking care of an ungrateful brat," Richard said. He stood up. He was a big man, and when he moved, he took up all the air in the room. "Get out." "What?" "Get out," Richard repeated. "If you don't want to support this family, you're not part of it. Pack your bags. Tonight. It's storming." I pointed to the window. Rain was lashing against the glass. The wind was howling. "I have nowhere to go." "Figure it out," Sandra said, turning her back to me to wash a dish. "Maybe the real world will teach you some gratitude." I thought they were bluffing. Parents don't kick 13-year-olds out in a storm, right? I went to the basement and sat on my mattress, waiting for them to come down and apologize. An hour later, Richard came down with 2 black garbage bags. He started sweeping my clothes, my books, my few toys into them. "Dad, stop," I begged. "I'm sorry. I'll sleep on the floor. Please." He didn't speak. He dragged the bags up the stairs. He grabbed me by the arm and marched me to the front door. He opened it. The wind blew rain into the hallway, soaking the carpet instantly. "You're useless to us here, Josh," he said. "Don't come back until you learn your place." He shoved me. I stumbled out onto the porch. He threw the 2 garbage bags at me. One of them split open, spilling my comic books into a puddle. The door slammed. I heard the deadbolt slide home. I stood there for 10 minutes, banging on the door. I cried. I screamed for my mom. I saw the curtain of the living room window move. I saw Tyler looking out. He was holding a soda. He smiled, gave me a little wave, and let the curtain fall. That was the moment Joshua the child died. I gathered my wet clothes and stuffed them back into the ripped bag. I tied it shut. I was wearing a thin hoodie and jeans. The temperature was dropping. I knew if I stayed on the porch, I would die of hypothermia. I had one option: Uncle Harold. Harold was Richard's older brother, but they hadn't spoken in years. Harold was the black sheep because he was successful, single, and didn't tolerate Richard's gambling or laziness. He lived 10 miles away, across town. I started walking. I don't remember much of that walk. I remember the cold rain feeling like needles. I remember the headlights of cars blinding me as I walked on the shoulder of the highway because there were no sidewalks. I remember clutching the garbage bags like they were gold because they were the only things I owned in the world. It took me 4 hours. I arrived at Uncle Harold's house at 11 p.m. I was blue. My teeth were chattering so hard I thought they would crack. I collapsed on his doorstep and rang the bell. When Harold opened the door, he didn't ask questions. He didn't ask why I was there. He took one look at me, at the garbage bags, and his face went hard. He scooped me up. I was so light back then, and carried me inside. He put me in a hot bath. He wrapped me in wool blankets. He fed me soup. Only when I stopped shivering did he ask, "Did they do this?" I nodded. Harold stood up. He walked to the phone in the kitchen. I heard him dialing. I thought he was calling the police. Instead, he called Richard. I only heard Harold's side of the conversation. It was short. "Richard, it's Harold. The boy is with me. No, shut up. You listen to me. If you ever come near him again, if you ever try to claim him, I will bury you. I have lawyers who will strip the skin off your back. No, he's not your son anymore. He's mine." He hung up. He came back to the living room, sat down next to me, and looked me in the eye. "Joshua," he said, "you are not useless. You are strong. You survived that walk. That means you have fire in you. They threw away a diamond because they wanted to keep a piece of glass. Do you understand?" I nodded, though I didn't fully understand yet. "From tonight on," Harold said, "we build you up. We make you so strong that they can never hurt you again." And that's exactly what we did. Life with Uncle Harold wasn't a fairy tale. It was a boot camp for life, but one built on love, not fear. Harold ran a successful construction and development firm. He was a man of precision, structure, and integrity, everything my father wasn't. The first week I lived with him, he took me to a specialist for my asthma. He threw out all the junk food I was used to eating. "Your body is your engine, Josh," he told me, tossing a box of sugary cereal into the trash. "Richard and Sandra fed you garbage because it was cheap and easy. We don't do easy. If you want to build a skyscraper, you don't use rotten concrete. If you want to build a life, you don't fuel it with poison." That lesson stuck with me. It's the reason I'm standing here today with 2 healthy kidneys while my brother is rotting from the inside out. Harold noticed my drawing immediately. Unlike my parents, who saw it as a waste of time, Harold saw it as a blueprint. He bought me professional drafting tables, CAD software, and books on architecture. He took me to his job sites on weekends. He showed me how to read a site plan, how to understand drainage, elevation, and structural load. By the time I was 16, the same age Tyler was when he took my room, I was designing patio layouts for Harold's clients. By 18, I was interning at his firm. I flourished. I grew tall. With proper nutrition and a dry, warm home, my asthma became manageable, almost non-existent. I started running. First a mile, then 5, then marathons. I needed to prove to myself that my body wasn't useless. Meanwhile, I heard whispers about the Myers family. Without me there to be the scapegoat and the distraction, the rot in their house spread quickly. Tyler's band broke up within months. He barely graduated high school. Richard and Sandra mortgaged the house to send him to a private art college, which he dropped out of after 1 semester because the professors didn't get his vision. They enabled him. Every time he failed, they blamed the world. He got a DUI at 20. It was the cop's fault. He got fired from a retail job. The manager was jealous. They cushioned every fall, so he never learned to stand. I went to the University of Washington on a full academic scholarship for landscape architecture. I graduated summa cum laude. I didn't take a dime from Harold for tuition, though he offered. I wanted to owe nothing to anyone. When I was 25, Harold got sick. Pancreatic cancer. It was aggressive. For 6 months, I was his nurse, his proxy, and his son. I slept in the chair next to his hospital bed. I managed his estate. One night, near the end, Harold grabbed my hand. He was weak, his skin like paper. "Josh," he whispered, "I've updated the will. Everything goes to you. The house, the investments, the silent shares in the company. I don't care about the money, Uncle Harold," I said, choking back tears. "I just want you." "I know," he smiled weakly. "That's why you deserve it. But listen to me. When I'm gone, they will come. Richard and Sandra. They smell money like sharks smell blood. You have to be ready. I won't give them a cent, I promised. It's not just the money, Harold wheezed. They will try to use guilt. They will try to claim family rights. You need to remember, family isn't DNA. Family is the people who sit by your bed when you're dying. You are my son, Josh, in every way that matters. Harold died 2 days later. At his funeral, I stood in the front row alone. Richard and Sandra showed up at the back, looking around, probably assessing the cost of the floral arrangements. They tried to approach me afterward. I got into my car and drove away without a word. I inherited everything. But the most important thing Harold left me wasn't the millions in assets. It was his philosophy. Protect your foundation. 5 years passed. I built my career. I became known as the Green Architect in Seattle, specializing in healing gardens. I bought my Porsche. I bought a house overlooking the Sound. I was happy. But Harold was right. They did come back. But not for money. They came for something far more visceral. Which brings us back to the medical file Sandra threw on my car. After the encounter in the parking garage, I didn't go home. I went to my office. I sat under the halogen lights and opened the file Sandra had left. It was a horror show. Tyler's medical history was a catalog of abuse. Liver damage from alcohol. Kidney failure from a combination of untreated hypertension and substance toxicity. Likely painkillers or opioids. He was 33 years old and his body was that of an 80-year-old. But then I saw the page that made my blood run cold. It was a lab report dated 3 months ago. HLA Tissue Typing Compatibility Summary. Subject 1. Tyler Myers, recipient. Subject 2. Joshua Myers, potential donor. Status. 99% match. High likelihood of successful graft. How did they have my DNA? I hadn't given blood. I hadn't been to a doctor in their network. Tissue typing requires a specific sample. You can't just guess it. I flipped through the pages frantically. Then I saw a small notation in the margin of a sample collection form. Source: follicle/saliva. Collected by Private Investigator J. Miller. Date: August 14th. August 14th. I checked my calendar. That was the day I was at a public coffee shop downtown, meeting a client. I remembered sitting on the patio. I remembered leaving my empty latte cup on the table when I left. They had stalked me. They had hired a PI to follow me, wait for me to discard a cup or a napkin, and stole my DNA. They had tested me like a lab rat without my consent. I felt violated. It was a violation of my privacy, my body, and my autonomy. They didn't see me as a person. They saw me as a container of spare parts that happened to be walking around. I pulled out my phone and called 2 people. First, Dr. Emily Chun, a close friend and a brilliant nephrologist, kidney specialist. Emily, I need you to look at a file. Off the record. I need to know if a transplant is even viable for a patient with this history. Second, Margaret Morrison. She was Harold's lawyer, and now she was mine. She was a shark in a Chanel suit. Margaret, I said when she answered. My mother is harassing me. But it's worse than that. They stole my genetic material. I need a restraining order. And I need to know what my legal rights are regarding forced organ donation. Margaret's voice was sharp. Joshua, nobody can force you to donate an organ. Not in this country. But the harassment. If they go to the media, they will paint you as the villain. Rich brother lets poor brother die. We need to get ahead of this. I want to bury them, Margaret, I said. I want them to regret ever saying my name. Then bring me the file, she said. And Josh? Check the paternity markers on that HLA report. What? If they ran a full genetic panel to check for compatibility, Margaret said, they would have had to map the alleles from both parents to ensure the match wasn't a false positive. Look at the allele breakdown. I looked at the complex chart of numbers and letters on page 42. I didn't understand the science, but I saw the red flag. There was a note from the lab technician. Warning: paternal haplotype inconsistency detected in subject 2, Joshua. Proceeding with direct match comparison only. Paternal haplotype inconsistency. I'm an architect, not a doctor. But I know what inconsistency means. It means the pieces don't fit. I stared at the paper. If my paternal DNA didn't match the expected profile, that meant Richard Myers wasn't my father. The world tilted on its axis. If Richard wasn't my father, then half of the abuse I suffered, the "why can't you be like your brother," the favoritism, the rejection, wasn't just because I was a nerd. It was because, on some subconscious level, Richard knew. Or Sandra knew, and she treated me like a mistake she wanted to forget. I wasn't the useless son. I was the inconvenient evidence of an affair. And now, she wanted the son of her affair to cut pieces out of himself to save the son of her marriage. A cold, dark laugh bubbled up in my throat. It started low and turned into a roar. I laughed until tears ran down my face. "Okay," I said to the empty room. "You want a meeting on Monday? Let's have a meeting." I wasn't going to hide. I was going to walk into that hospital, and I was going to drop a nuclear bomb on the Myers family. The weekend before the deadline was a nightmare of psychological warfare. Sandra hadn't lied about her persistence. It started with text messages. She must have gotten my number from the same PI who stole my trash. Saturday, 8 a.m. "Josh, please don't be late on Monday. 9 a.m. at St. Jude's. Room 402. Saturday, 12 p.m. Tyler is in so much pain. He's asking for you. He wants to apologize. Saturday, 6 p.m. Remember when you fell off your bike and Tyler carried you home? He loves you." That was a lie. I fell off my bike because Tyler pushed me. He didn't carry me home. He left me in the ditch laughing. By Sunday, the tactics changed. Richard got involved. I was at a brunch meeting with a potential client, a developer looking to build a green roof on a new hotel. We were sitting at a prominent table in a downtown bistro. My phone buzzed. I ignored it. Then the restaurant phone rang. The hostess looked confused and walked over to our table. "Mr. Myers?" she asked. "There's a gentleman on the line. He says it's an emergency regarding your brother. He says it's life or death." My client looked concerned. "Oh my God, Joshua. Take it. Is everything okay?" I felt the heat rise in my neck. They were humiliating me professionally. I took the phone. "Hello. You think you can hide?" Richard's voice was slurred. He was drunk at 11 a.m. on a Sunday. "You think you're better than us with your fancy suits? You're murdering him. Everyone needs to know. I'm going to call the papers. I'm going to tell them the great architect is a fratricidal maniac." "Richard," I said, keeping my voice level for the sake of my client, "if you call this number again, I will add harassment to the police report I filed on Friday. Goodbye." I hung up. I apologized to my client, blaming a mentally unstable distant relative. I saved the deal, but I was shaking. This was their strategy. Pressure. Shame. They thought if they squeezed hard enough, I would crack and give them what they wanted just to make it stop. They didn't realize that Uncle Harold had reinforced my steel. That afternoon, I met with Dr. Emily Chun. She had reviewed the stolen file. "Josh," Emily said, looking grim, "this is unethical on so many levels. But medically speaking, giving Tyler a kidney is like throwing a diamond into a volcano." "Explain," I said. "His liver enzymes are shot." She pointed to the chart. "He has markers for continued alcohol abuse within the last 2 weeks. No reputable transplant center would approve him for the active waiting list. He has to be 6 months sober minimum. The fact that he's even being considered suggests your mother is lying to the doctors or hiding his addiction. So if I gave him the kidney, he'd likely destroy it within a year," Emily said. "The surgery has a 40% chance of complications for him because of his weak heart. And for you, it's a major surgery. You lose 50% of your kidney function instantly. Recovery takes weeks. Why risk your life for a graft that is destined to fail?" "I'm not going to," I said. "But I need to know about the DNA." Emily pulled out the genetic chart. "It's conclusive, Josh. You and Tyler share about 25% of your DNA, typical for half-siblings. You share maternal markers, Sandra. You do not share paternal markers. Richard is not your biological father. Do they know? I asked. The lab knows, Emily said. But unless Sandra requested a specific paternity report, she might not have looked closely at the raw data. She just saw a match and stopped reading. She thinks you're compatible because you're full brothers. But ironically, you're a match despite being half-brothers. It's a genetic fluke. Does Richard know? I doubt it, Emily said. Men don't usually raise another man's child for 13 years and then kick him out unless they're abusive. Oh wait. Yeah, I said. He doesn't know. He treats me like dirt because he hates me, not because he knows I'm not his. I took the file back. Thanks, Emily. What are you going to do? I'm going to go to that appointment, I said, and I'm going to give them a diagnosis they'll never recover from. Monday morning, St. Jude's Medical Center. The transplant wing was sterile, quiet, and smelled of antiseptic and despair. I arrived at 8:55 a.m. I was wearing my best suit, charcoal gray, Italian cut. I carried a leather briefcase. Inside were three things: the medical file, the restraining order Margaret had rushed through a judge that morning, and a photo Emily had printed for me. I found room 402. The door was open. Inside, it was a tableau of tragic theater. Tyler was lying in the bed, hooked up to monitors. He looked awful. His skin was yellow-gray, his face puffy, his once handsome features bloated by fluid retention and toxins. But his eyes were still the same, arrogant, entitled. Sandra was sitting by the bed, holding his hand. Richard was pacing the room, looking like a caged bear. When I walked in, the room went silent. You came, Sandra breathed. She stood up, her face lighting up with a triumphant smile. I knew it. I knew you'd come through. Richard stopped pacing. He grunted. About time. Doctor's coming in 10 minutes. We need to sign the donor consent forms before he gets here, so we can fast-track the scheduling. I walked to the foot of the bed. I looked at Tyler. Hey, little brother, Tyler rasped. His voice was wet and weak. Nice suit. Pay for that with the money Uncle Harold stole from Dad. That was the narrative they spun? That Harold stole from Richard? Unbelievable. Hello, Tyler, I said. You look like hell. I'm dying, genius, Tyler spat. But you're gonna fix that, right? Sandra rushed forward, thrusting a clipboard at me. Here, Josh. It's standard. Just sign here, here, and here. It says you volunteer freely, you understand the risks, blah blah. Just legal nonsense. I took the clipboard. I looked at the form. I, Joshua Myers, hereby consent to the donation of 1 kidney. Freely, I read aloud. That's a funny word to use after you stalked me, stole my DNA, harassed my employers, and threatened to sue me. We did what we had to do, Richard barked. Family does what it takes. Stop whining and sign the paper. Yeah, Josh, Tyler wheezed. Don't be a dick. I promise I'll invite you to the rebirth party, after I'm better. I might even let you drive my car. Oh wait, I crashed it. Maybe you can buy me a new one. He chuckled. Richard chuckled. Sandra smiled nervously. They hadn't changed. Not one bit. They were begging for my body part, and they were still mocking me. They still thought they owned me. I looked at the pen in my hand. Then, I looked at Sandra. No, I said. The silence was absolute. What? Sandra whispered. No, I said louder. I snapped the cheap plastic pen in half and dropped the pieces on the floor. I tossed the clipboard onto the bed. I'm not signing. I'm not donating. I'm not saving him. You can't, Sandra stammered. You're the match. You're here. I came here to tell you to your face, I said. So there is no confusion. I am keeping my kidneys. Both of them. You selfish bastard, Richard roared. He lunged at me, but stopped when he saw the look in my eyes. I wasn't the scared 13-year-old anymore. I was 6 feet 2 inches, fit and furious. Why? Sandra cried. Why do you hate us so much? Is this about the room? Is this about the basement? I'll buy you a house. I'll buy you 10 houses. Just save him. It's not about the room, Sandra, I said. It's about the fact that you don't think I'm a human being. You think I'm a spare part. I opened my briefcase. And besides, it wouldn't work. What do you mean? Tyler asked, looking scared for the first time. I pulled out the photo Emily gave me. It was a picture taken by the PI they hired, but included in the raw file dump they hadn't scrubbed properly. It showed Tyler 3 days ago, sitting on his porch, smoking a cigarette and holding a red Solo cup. This is Tyler 72 hours ago, I said, holding up the photo. Drinking vodka, while on the transplant wait list. That's a lie, Sarah screamed. It was water. It was vodka, I said. His liver panels confirm it. He's an addict, Mom. And you're enabling him. If I give him a kidney, he'll drink it into failure within 6 months. I'm not cutting myself open to pour blood into a bucket with a hole in the bottom. He'll stop, Richard yelled. He swore he'd stop. He's been swearing that for 10 years, I said. But that's not the only reason. I pulled out the restraining order. This is a court order signed by Judge Holloway this morning. It mandates that Richard Myers and Sandra Myers stay 500 feet away from me, my home, and my place of employment. If you contact me again, you go to jail. You're arresting your own parents? Sandra sobbed. We're your family. Are we? I asked. I pulled out the final piece of paper. The DNA report. You relied on this report to find me, I said, looking at Richard. You were so happy to see the 99% match, but you didn't read the fine print. I walked over to Richard. He looked confused, angry, and sweaty. Read the line about paternal haplotype, I said, shoving the paper into his chest. Richard grabbed it. He squinted. What is this? It means, I said, my voice cutting through the room like a scalpel, that while I share DNA with Sandra, I share 0 DNA with you, Richard. Richard froze. The room seemed to lose all its oxygen. What? Richard whispered. He looked up at me, then at Sandra. Sandra stopped crying instantly. Her face went the color of ash. Josh, stop, she hissed. Don't do this. You did this, I yelled. You stole my DNA. You brought this into the light. Richard, look at her. Look at your wife. Richard turned slowly to Sandra. Sandra? What is he talking about? It's a mistake, Sandra babbled, backing away. The lab made a mistake. Josh is lying. He's trying to tear us apart. The lab doesn't lie, I said. I'm not your son, Richard. I never was. That's why I'm so different, right? That's why Tyler is the golden boy and I'm the mistake. Who was it? Sandra? Was it a coworker? A neighbor? Shut up, Sandra screamed. Tell him. I roared. It was the contractor. Sandra screamed back, breaking. It was the man who fixed the roof. Are you happy? It was one time. It meant nothing. Richard looked like he had been shot in the gut. He dropped the paper. He looked at Tyler, his biological son, dying in the bed. Then he looked at me, the stranger he had raised and abused. Then he looked at Sandra. You! Richard choked out. I raised him. I fed him. And he wasn't even mine? You let me believe. Richard, please, we have to focus on Tyler. Sandra begged, grabbing his arm. Richard shoved her away so hard she hit the wall. Don't touch me. You liar. You whore. Dad. Tyler cried out weakly. Dad, stop. My kidney. To hell with your kidney. Richard screamed, his face purple. My life is a lie. The heart monitor on Tyler's bed started beeping rapidly. Nurses were running down the hall. I buttoned my jacket. My work here was done. I'm leaving now, I said calmly. The restraining order is in effect immediately. Do not follow me. I walked out of the room. Behind me, I heard the sounds of a family imploding. Richard was screaming. Sandra was wailing. Tyler was crashing. I didn't look back. I walked to the elevator. My legs felt like jelly, but I kept my head high. I passed a team of doctors rushing toward room 402 with a crash cart. Tyler had gone into cardiac arrest from the stress. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby. When the doors closed, cutting off the noise of the screaming, I leaned my head against the cool metal wall and exhaled a breath I felt like I had been holding for 15 years. It was over. I walked out to the parking lot. The sun was shining. It was a beautiful, crisp autumn day. The contrast between the weather and the carnage I had just left behind was jarring. I got into my Porsche. I sat there for 20 minutes, my hands gripping the steering wheel. I wasn't happy. You don't feel happy when you watch people get destroyed, even if they deserve it. I felt empty, scoured clean. My phone buzzed. It was Margaret. "It's done," she said. "The sheriff just served Richard the papers in the hospital hallway. Though from what I hear, he's not in a state to read them." "He knows," I said. "I told him." "You told him about the paternity?" "Yes." Margaret paused. "Remind me never to cross you, Joshua." "Is I safe?" I asked. "You're safe," she said. "Richard has left the hospital." He took his car and drove off. He told the nurses he's not coming back. Sandra is hysterical. Tyler is stabilized but critical. They won't be coming after you, Josh. They're too busy killing each other. "Good," I said. "Send me the bill." I drove home. I drove along the coast, watching the waves crash against the rocks. That night, I sat on my deck with a glass of wine. I looked at the stars. I thought about the boy in the basement. I thought about the 13-year-old walking in the rain with garbage bags. I wished I could go back and tell him, "Hold on. It gets better. You're not useless. You're the one who survives." I had my kidney. I had my dignity. And for the first time in my life, I was truly, completely free. But as I sat there, I realized something. The story wasn't quite over. Tyler was still alive. And believe it or not, the golden child had one last thing to say to the shadow. 6 months. That is how long it takes for a dynasty built on lies to crumble into dust. If you have never watched a house of cards collapse in real time, it is a fascinating, terrifying spectacle. After I walked out of St. Jude's Hospital that Monday morning, leaving my biological family screaming in a room that smelled of antiseptic and betrayal, silence descended on my life. Real silence. For the first time in 30 years, there was no background radiation of guilt. There was no waiting for the other shoe to drop. I woke up the next morning in my house overlooking the sound, made coffee, and watched the sunrise. My phone didn't ring. My email was empty of threats. The restraining order, which Margaret had served with the efficiency of a guillotine blade, had done its job. But just because I wasn't in the room doesn't mean I didn't hear the echoes of the explosion. When you live in a city like Seattle, and when your family makes a scene as public as the one in room 402, word travels. The fallout was nuclear. Richard Myers didn't just leave the hospital. He scorched the earth. According to court filings, which Margaret forwarded to me with a grim sense of professional satisfaction, Richard filed for divorce 48 hours after I revealed the DNA results. He didn't just cite irreconcilable differences. He cited paternity fraud. He was suing Sandra for damages. He wanted every dime he had spent raising me for 13 years back. He wanted compensation for emotional distress. He was a man whose ego had been fatally wounded. For a narcissist like Richard, finding out he had been cuckolded by a roof contractor 30 years ago was worse than his son dying. It destroyed his narrative of supremacy. He abandoned Sandra completely. He froze their joint accounts. He canceled her credit cards. The woman who had spent her life manipulating the men around her suddenly found herself with no leverage and no audience. And Tyler? Tyler didn't die immediately. That would have been too merciful. He lingered. I learned the details from Sarah, Tyler's wife, or rather, his widow. It was a rainy Tuesday in April when she showed up at my office. The security guard, Marcus, called me from the lobby. "Mr. Myers, there is a Mrs. Sarah Myers here. She says she has a box for you. She says Tyler passed away on Sunday." I felt a strange thud in my chest. Not grief. Not exactly. It was more like the final period being placed at the end of a very long, very painful sentence. Send her up, I said. Sarah looked 10 years older than her age. She was wearing black, her eyes swollen, her hands shaking as she clutched a cardboard box. She walked into my office and placed the box on my drafting table. He's gone, she said. Her voice was flat, hollowed out by months of watching someone disintegrate. I'm sorry for your loss, Sarah, I said, and I meant it. I was sorry she had to go through that. I was sorry she had married a phantom. He didn't get a transplant, she said, staring at the floor. After you left, after Dad left, Mom, Sandra, she tried to find another donor. She tried to buy one. She was posting on illegal forums. She was desperate. But Tyler was too sick. The infection spread to his blood. His heart couldn't take it. She looked up at me then. He was terrified, Josh. At the end, he was so scared. I nodded slowly. I can imagine. He asked for you, she said, every day. Not to ask for the kidney anymore. Just to talk. But Sandra wouldn't let me call you. And then with the restraining order, we didn't know if you'd answer. I wouldn't have, I said honestly. I couldn't. I know, Sarah sighed. She pushed the box toward me. He made me promise to give you this. It's the only thing he wanted you to have. Richard didn't want you at the funeral. Sandra is in a psychiatric hold. She had a breakdown when he flatlined. So, it's just me. She turned to leave. Sarah, I called out. She stopped. Why did you stay? I asked. You knew he was drinking. You knew he was killing himself. Why did you stay? She looked at me with a sad, weary smile. Because I thought I could save him. I thought if I loved him enough, he would stop needing to be the golden child. I thought I could fix what your parents broke. She shook her head. But you can't fix people who don't want to be fixed. You were the smart one, Josh. You ran away. The rest of us? We just drowned. She left. I sat alone in my office with the box. Outside, the rain lashed against the glass, just like it had the night I was kicked out. I opened the lid. Inside, there wasn't much. A few photos of us when we were very small, before the hierarchy was established. A beat-up drumstick. And a digital voice recorder. I picked up the recorder. It was an old model, scratched and taped together. I pressed play. The voice that filled the room was weak, punctuated by the hiss of an oxygen machine and the rhythmic beep of monitors. But it was Tyler. Josh, if you're listening to this, well, I guess the golden boy finally rusted out. A wet, hacking cough. Then silence for a long time. I hated you, you know. I really did. But not for the reasons you think. I didn't hate you because you were weird or quiet. I hated you because you were free. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the spinning tape counter. Mom and Dad, Richard and Sandra, they looked at you and saw nothing. They saw useless. But they looked at me and saw their God. Do you have any idea how heavy that is? Being a God? Couldn't fail, Josh. I couldn't be average. I couldn't just be Tyler. I had to be the quarterback, the rock star, the artist. Every time I messed up, they swept it under the rug. They never let me learn. They crippled me. His voice cracked. I remember that night, the night they kicked you out. I stood in the window and laughed. You probably saw me. I laughed because I was terrified. I wanted to go with you. I swear to God, Josh, I wanted to grab a bag and run into the rain with you. But I was a coward. I liked the warmth. I liked the praise. So I stayed. And I let them eat me alive. Another long pause. I could hear him taking a sip of water, struggling to swallow. You were right about the kidney. I would have wasted it. I drank because it was the only time the pressure stopped. It was the only time I didn't feel like a fraud. You kept your parts. Good. You deserve them. You built a life. I just built a lie. I'm sorry, brother. I'm sorry I took your room. I'm sorry I took your parents, though honestly you got the better deal on that one. Uncle Harold. He was the only real man in our family. He picked the right son. Don't come to the funeral. They don't deserve to see you. Just build something good. Build something that lasts. Goodbye, Shadow. The recording clicked off. I sat there for a long time. The office was dark now. The city lights of Seattle were blinking on below me. I didn't cry. I think I had cried all my tears for Tyler years ago. But I felt a shifting inside me. A massive, tectonic plate of resentment that had been grinding against my soul for 15 years finally settled. Tyler hadn't won. The golden child wasn't a prince. He was a prisoner. My parents hadn't gifted him the kingdom. They had locked him in a tower of expectations and starved him of reality until he withered away. I was the lucky one. I was the one they threw away. And in throwing me away, they had accidentally given me the greatest gift of all. The chance to become myself. I put the recorder back in the box. I would keep it, not as a memento of love, but as a reminder. A reminder that useless is just a word people use when they can't figure out how to exploit you. 2 weeks later, life moved forward. It always does. I was at the site of my latest project, the healing garden at the Veterans Hospital. It was a massive undertaking. 4 acres of terraced greenery, water features designed to mask city noise, and sensory paths for patients recovering from traumatic brain injuries. I was checking the installation of a Japanese maple tree. It was a beautiful specimen, but it had a large scar on its trunk where a branch had been torn off years ago. The bark had healed over it, creating a knot that was gnarled but incredibly strong. It gives it character, a voice said behind me. I turned around. It was Dr. Emily Chun. She wasn't wearing her white coat today. She was wearing jeans and a raincoat, her hair loose around her shoulders. The scar, she pointed to the tree. It proves it survived something. That's why I picked it, I said, wiping dirt from my hands. Perfection is boring. Survival is art. Emily smiled. She stepped closer to me. Over the last 6 months, our relationship had shifted. What started as a professional consultation over a stolen medical file had grown into late-night dinners, long drives in the Porsche, and a quiet, steady trust that I hadn't felt since Uncle Harold died. I heard about Richard, she said softly. Oh, I hadn't checked the news. He lost the lawsuit against your mother, Emily said. The judge threw it out, said the statute of limitations on paternity fraud had passed 20 years ago. Richard is bankrupt. He spent his last dime on the lawyer. He's living in a motel in Tacoma. And Sandra? She was released from the psychiatric ward. She's moving to Arizona to live with a distant cousin. She's selling the house. The bank is foreclosing on it anyway to pay Tyler's medical debts. I looked out at the garden. The wind rustled the leaves of the maple tree. The house, the one where I lost my bedroom, the one where I was called useless, was gone. The people who inhabited it were scattered to the winds. It's over, I said. It's over, Emily agreed. She took my hand. Her fingers were warm. So, what does the architect do now that the demolition is finished? I squeezed her hand. I looked at the garden I was building. A place designed to help broken people find peace. Now, I said, now I build. I did not go to Tyler's funeral. I know that bothers some people. There is a societal script that says death absolves all sins, that you must stand by the grave and weep regardless of the abuse. But I have rewritten the script of my life, and that scene wasn't in it. Instead, on the day they put my brother in the ground, I drove to a small cemetery on the north side of Seattle. I parked my car under an old oak tree and walked to a simple granite headstone. Harold Myers, 1955 to 2020. He built foundations. I placed a fresh set of blueprints on the grass, the final plans for the healing garden. It was my tradition. Every time I finished a major project, I showed it to Harold first. I did it, Uncle Harold, I said to the stone. The wolves came to the door just like you said they would, but they didn't get in. I sat there for an hour, just listening to the wind. I thought about the DNA test. I thought about the irony of Richard Myers raising a son he hated, only to find out that the son he loved wasn't even capable of surviving the life Richard built for him. I thought about biology. For 15 years, I had let the question of why haunt me. Why didn't they love me? Why was I the shadow? The DNA test answered the biological why, but the recording from Tyler answered the spiritual one. They didn't love me because I was a mirror. When they looked at Tyler, they saw the fantasy of who they wanted to be: rich, famous, talented. When they looked at me, they saw the reality: hard work, struggle, quiet resilience. They hated reality, so they hated me, but that hate was my armor. If they had loved me, if they had coddled me like Tyler, I would be the one in that coffin right now. I would be the one with the failed liver and the wasted potential. Their neglect forced me to become self-sufficient. Their cruelty forced me to find Uncle Harold. Their abandonment forced me to build a fortress of competence around myself. I stood up and brushed the grass off my pants. I touched the cold stone of Harold's grave one last time. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you for saving me." I walked back to my car. As I drove back toward the city, I felt a physical lightness. The restraining order was in my glove box, but I didn't need it anymore. They were ghosts now. Sandra in Arizona, Richard in a motel, Tyler in the ground. They were just stories I would tell to warn others. I pulled into the driveway of my home. Emily was there, sitting on the porch, waiting for me. She had a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and gold. I looked at my hands. These hands had drawn skyscrapers. These hands had planted trees. These hands had held the hand of a dying man who actually loved me. And most importantly, these hands had broken a pen in a hospital room and refused to sign away my life. I am Joshua Myers. I am 30 years old. I am an architect. I am a survivor. And I am finally, beautifully, undeniably useless to anyone who wants to use me. This story isn't just about a kidney transplant or a DNA test. It is about the most difficult word in the human language: no. Many of you listening to this have been trained, conditioned, and brainwashed to believe that family is a suicide pact. You have been told that you must set yourself on fire to keep others warm, simply because you share a last name. You have been told that your body, your money, and your peace of mind are community property to be harvested by parents or siblings who have never planted a single seed of love in your life. My story is proof that this is a lie. Biology is an accident. Family is a choice. You have the absolute, God-given right to curate the people in your life. You have the right to close the door. You have the right to be useless to their toxicity so you can be useful to your own happiness. If you are the shadow child, the black sheep, or the scapegoat, I want you to hear this. Your value is not determined by how much you can sacrifice for your abusers. Your value is inherent. Now, I want to hear from you. Has there ever been a moment in your life where you had to say a hard no to a family member to save yourself? Did you feel the guilt? How did you overcome it? If this story gave you the courage to draw a line in the sand, or if you simply agree that we are the architects of our own worth, please do me a favor. Leave a comment below with the word good. Just that one word, good, tells me that you understand. It tells me that we are building a community of survivors who know that sometimes the best way to love yourself is to walk away from those who refuse to. Thank you for listening. Stay strong, stay useless to the users, and build something beautiful.